Welcome back to the Pipeline of People podcast. Today I'm joined by Adrienne Ramsay, the founder of Delphi Strategies. Her career spans senior engineering roles, policy leadership on the Hill, advising on more than $250 billion of defense and intelligence programs, and much more. Now she helps companies tighten the link between vision and execution, align teams, and avoid the failure patterns that sink growth. Adrienne, thank you so much for being here.
Aiden, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Could you kick us off with a quick look at your background? How did you get through all of those things and end up saying, I want to start my own thing?
I think that how I got through all of that is I suffer from a chronic condition called ants in the pants. And ants in the pants is a wonderful thing of once I learn something and I understand how it works, I want to go learn something else and something new. So once I learned how to build a satellite and to do program management, I said to myself, you know what, it's time for me to go learn how to design a radar. And then from there it was, go off and understand how the federal budgeting system works, and then go off and learn how to write legislation. And I think it's just that sort of questing nature of, I want to just go learn something new. So starting a company on my own after a while and looking for good problems and great clients to work with is, I think, just built into my DNA, and it falls back to the ants in the pants. So, embrace your own personality and follow it. So, yeah, that's how I did it.
It's very impressive. It's one of the most kind of diverse backgrounds that we've seen on this show. Engineering, policy, appropriations, advising people. Like, when you look back at that path, what were the early experiences that kind of shaped how you think about leadership and decision making now in Delphi Strategies?
I've been thinking about this a lot because I think it's really easy to start something. It's really hard to execute something. And the best leaders I ever worked with recognized that it's not just the big bang that you have to go for, the announcement, the reorganization. It's really putting nose to grindstone and actually going off and doing something, and knowing that that everyday grind is going to be much more unsung, but also you will get to be where you want to be. And I think it's true, especially that we're now in a new year, happy 2026, but like we all have our resolutions. We're going to get healthier, we're going to read more books, we're going to find a new job, and we can lay down those goals, but until you actually do the work, you're not going to get them for the most part. And I say this because 2 years ago, 18 months ago I should say, I said I was going to write a book, and 18 months later I have a manuscript, and that 18 months was exhausting and hard, and I threw a lot away, and a lot of it has been restructured. It's really nice to have that thrill of something new. I think in leadership, it's knowing that that's not it. There's a lot more behind that. And I think I've taken that into myself with all of my changes, which is, there's a nervousness and a wonderfulness of changing a location, changing a job, changing a career path. But the really, really hard step is following through on that and doing the work.
I think that's the benefit of like the New Year's resolutions, but I'm not a huge fan of them personally. I think, if you want to do something, you want to change something, just tomorrow. There's no better time than tomorrow.
I'm in violent agreement with you.
How was the start of, I've done all this stuff and I'm starting my own business and I have all these lessons, and did it kind of take off right away, or was there an element of consistency that you needed to have?
So starting anything has its own adrenaline rush. You get to design the logo, you get to lay down the website, you get to do all that fun stuff. You get to start learning how to use invoicing software and the like. But I will say that I think everything runs in cycles. I think it's different for everybody. Sometimes you're really hot, sometimes you're not. The difficulty of starting something is, especially a solopreneur or a very small company, is you got to be willing to do everything and then figure out what you can contract out, accounting and time management, or you got to figure that out. And that's something that is trial and error. I started late in life. I had decades of experience within large organizations where different things were taken care of for me. I think that experience allowed me a great deal more understanding of where my limitations were and where they may not be limitations, but where I don't want to do things. I am always impressed when young people, and I say that as a vintage person myself, go off and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I got to tell you, the scar tissue that I have from my previous careers, I think was very helpful for that. But this going off on your own, doing it, nose to grindstone, it's a commitment, and it's a commitment that needs care and feeding every day. And it's very hard for me to turn off and go on holiday or take time for myself. So that's something that I have to budget in.
Yeah, that part's definitely difficult. And honestly, just as someone going through it right now, it's definitely not easy. And the amount of things that you don't think about that come up is just insane.
The unknown unknowns are epic.
Oh, yeah. Got
No matter how
taxes
smart
coming
you
up
are.
now. Trying to figure
Every
that
day,
out.
every day. Doesn't matter. You know, huge fan of the unknown unknowns, the Donald Rumsfeld speech. You know, there's only so much that you can plan for, but you gotta roll with the punches. And I think it's the rolling with the punches which, you know, gets tiresome. Again, solopreneur. You know, my husband looks at me and goes, well, what happened today? And I'm blah, blah, blah. It's one of those things that's very hard. Having a good support network around you to help you get through those is an absolute plus.
Absolutely. The people around you for sure is a huge thing. I remember when I first started, I went about 100 meetings, 6 months, 7 months, nothing. Not a client, not nothing, just throwing money out the window.
Make it rain.
And people are always asking, oh, how's the business going? Like, yeah, it's good. I get to work for myself. But yeah, no, that part's definitely tough. So having good people around you for sure is a benefit.
Always looking for the next one. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, every day is a new day. Something can change. Your client list can change. You know, you may not enjoy what you're working on. You might love what you're working on, and the client no longer needs you. So it's developing that sort of thicker skin, understanding that things just don't always go up. For those who have the ever accelerating, I am in awe of them. Being able to be confident in the slower times is also, I think, a skill.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just pulling up this image that I found. It's quite exactly what we're talking about, right? About the cycles. It's you start with uninformed optimism, and then it goes, what is that? Yeah, uninformed optimism, pessimism, to the valley of despair. But then you start going back up with informed optimism, right? So it's
Well,
that,
the Gartner hype cycle is exactly
Yeah.
that as well. I mean, it's this irrational exuberance, and then you come down into the trough of disillusionment. And you know, I think that that's true whether you are a solopreneur and it's internal to how your business cycle rolls. But I also think it's true with a lot of things. I mean, the new car that you are hoping for, the hype associated with a technology, you have to have time and energy. And time is the thing that is the most valuable, is to be able to sit in it and figure out what's going on. And again, I think that there's the joy of that adrenaline rush, that sugar high, whatever you'd like to call it, where you are absolutely optimistic. But things take time, and you don't become a master overnight. You have to, an expert takes time to develop the instincts, to understand the boundaries and everything. And in my career of trying different things, one of the things I loved about what I've done, and if I didn't love it, I hopefully wouldn't have done it, but it's seeing the synergies and how things are called different things in different locations, but people are people. And it's fascinating to me how alike so many things are with different sort of patterns. So a lot of what we do is pattern oriented, unconstrained abilities to move. You know, they have this mythology about the genius who figures it out and it's a big bang and then it's adopted. And that's true in pretty much any industry, in any government. People want things to move quickly. And the answer is there's a reason why you have processes. The Delphi process, it's a 6-step process. This isn't rocket science, but it's the idea of how do you maneuver your way through this so that you can minimize your uncertainties, minimize your risks, because you're still going to have unknown unknowns. But you still have to have the conversation of where will you fall and where will there be roadblocks. And it's something that it's very hard to do when you're excited about something, but it's very easy for an outside third party to come in and say, I hear how wonderful this is, but let's talk about it. And that's one of the things I love doing is talking about people's visions and seeing how to actually implement them, to get away from that hype cycle and move into that execution phase so that they can achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you kind of answered my next question there. I was going to say we discussed imposter syndrome a whole bunch there, but I want to kind of talk about, what do you actually now, and what is the 6-step process?
Well, the 6-step process is the Delphi process. It's branded to being able to describe and define what you're trying to do, to exploit the resources that you have internally, to sort of process and see what else is out there so that you can see the lay of the land. And then it's actually taking all that information and putting it into something that you can present out such that you can get feedback. From there, that feedback is both good and bad feedback. You seek the people who may not like what you have to say or are neutral and try to extract why so that you can hone your ideas and then you can then go implement. And, I think it's a framework. It's a framework of thinking. It's not just going in, it's when I was a kid, they used to say when you write an essay, write out an outline so that you have your thesis, you have your supporting information, you have your conclusion. It's similar to that because I think a lot of people just go in and start shooting with or projecting their ideas and they don't do their homework about who they're talking to and what's in it for the person who's listening to them. And I think that that's something that, it's developing a little bit more meat on the bone for conversations. And then, look, it's really uncomfortable when somebody doesn't like you or doesn't like your idea. I totally understand it. But there's a lean in and say, they might have a point. What is it? And is it something that I disagree with, which is fine? Is it something that I should look at? And because they can't be an army of one. So maybe I need to listen to this. And then you can say, do I want to address it or don't I want to address it? And if I don't want to address it, here are the arguments of why this is not why I'm going to address it. And, again, I think that takes a lot of maturity associated with, and I don't mean like age maturity, I mean like emotional maturity as well as time to mature the ideas. There are a lot of great ideas out there that don't fly. There are a lot of stupid ideas out there that don't fly. But where should you put your next marginal dollar? Where should you put your next marginal resource? And I think that that's a really, really hard thing to do. And believe you me, the last thing I want to do is walk into a meeting and have somebody just rail across an idea that I have that it's just awful. But I do also have to sit in it. And I have to say they have a reason for that. And I then can make the judgment of this is not the person who I want to work with, or this is not the right person who I'm pitching to, or wow, they're kind of right. And I need to change. So I think it's that sort of being able to sit in the uncomfortable, which is maybe part of the imposter syndrome where I've learned a little bit because it's really easy to go, well, they're just idiots.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe not.
That skill is, I guess, emotional intelligence skill, whatever you want to call it, is so, so important. Not even just in business, but in life, in relationships. Being able to take in someone else's perspective, put yourself in their shoes, understand how they're feeling or what their idea is or the opinion or point of view that they have. A lot of people struggle with this. A lot. And it's almost frustrating talking to people like that when you are able to do the opposite.
And I will say, look, it's much easier when you're in a safe space with the door closed with a single person, a consultant, a coach, a trusted agent who will tell you your pants are on fire, or that dog doesn't hunt, or here are the reasons what you're going to run into, and plays that devil's advocate so that when you step out of that door, you have your arguments in line. You're comfortable with them. And that's what I love doing. I love being that trusted agent, that trusted sounding board to say, does this look good on me? Does this make my butt look, fat? I'm not selling you. I'm going to try to make you look better because I'm going to try to help you work through what does look good and what doesn't look good. And I think that that's a really, really valuable thing that leaders know that they need to have. I won't call it the contrarian, but the person who will not just say yes. And if they do say yes, can also say, have you considered? Because a career like mine, my best jobs have always been when somebody has said to me, you know what, have you considered, or you'd be really good at? And I sat with it and said, that's uncomfortable for me, but maybe they have a point. So the transition from being in industry and being a program manager and a design engineer was that transition to federal oversight and being a federal employee was triggered when one of my colleagues said, you know what, you're asking questions like a staffer on the Hill. You might be really good at that. And I hated what he said because I am an engineer. I am a sacred, smart, logical, technology-driven person. And that's me. The people who I have to sell these things to are not. And I sat with it and I said, wait a second, maybe I should go try that so that I understand what they're trying to do. So I would say if you can lean into the unknowns, not necessarily the unknown unknowns, but the unknown knowns, you're gonna see a more rounded capability, a more rounded argument. And that's kind of what I love doing, is being part of that sort of growth.
Yeah. And I had a very similar experience, actually. The CEO of the old firm I worked at came up to me and he was like, I don't think you're going to be good at this. And it was like related to finance. And I was like, what? I went to school for finance. I've been doing finance the whole time. I got this. What are you talking about? And he's like, but you will be good at tech and data. So why don't you, we're going to put you into that role. So go do that. And at the time I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I was good at it, and then it kind of led me down this path to where I am today with the tech and the AI and the data. So yeah, it is hard to accept, and it is uncomfortable at the time. I was quite offended because kind of what I had in my mind. Yeah. What do you mean I'm not going to be good at this?
That. So I jokingly call myself a recovering engineer. You know, I understand the engineering principles. I'm still, hopefully, logical. Still a systems engineer at heart. I can get into tech and I can unwind what sounds like crazy and what sounds more viable. I try to keep those skills up. I'm no longer a design engineer. I no longer do the mathematics associated with it. I think I could probably dust off some of those cobwebs and kick it back into gear if I have to. But that foundation of how to break problems apart and how to stitch them back together and how to communicate them, which is not something engineers are well known to do, is, I think, again, I feel I can slander just a little bit because I am one, so I'm slandering myself, but it's really super important. And I think in any company, in any environment, that bridging that divide of, how to technically understand something and then how to communicate it out to people who are not technical is a skill. And that's what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that's what you do. Just for the audience and clarity, what someone, maybe a friend, comes up to you and says, Adrienne, what do you do at Delphi Strategies? What's your actual job? How do you phrase that? What do you say?
I am a problem solver at heart, and I don't have a really great elevator speech because I feel like I'm a big brain who sucks in information and then helps put out strategies, messaging, ways to implement, ways to find return on your investments. I know what I have done is help people achieve their goals inside the federal government, whether it is engaging with Congress and being able to talk to their congressional support or their congressional representation and achieve earmarks. I've helped a lot of people understand what Congress and the administration can do for their companies' goals. I also love doing long-term strategy and M&A analyses of not just buying companies and how are you going to land them and whether or not it's good value for the larger company or for the acquiring company, I guess I should say, but also how to set yourself up for selling and finding the right people who will hopefully not rip the wings off of your company, but give your company greater value once it's acquired. You know what, Jaden, let me come back in 6 months and I'll have a pitch for you.
Okay, sounds good. So a little homework assignment. I like it.
Homework assignment for me.
So how does AI currently or in the future fit into what you do, your success process, and A's, everything you kind of just mentioned?
So as I said, look, I am writing a book and I know it's going to come out sometime in 2026. So invite me back and I will happily talk about that. One of the things that I have used AI for as I write this is as a sounding board, because as an individual, I'm writing on something very technical. The book is called A Field Guide to Congress, the Appropriations Process. So something I know very familiar because I've gone through it several times and I was staff on it. I'm trying to make this accessible, but I have my own blinders on. So I've used it to correct my spelling, because again, recovering engineer, and my grammar. So I love AI for that. We do have a love-hate relationship where I sometimes believe it is crazy. But I also have used it to read the text that I've written and say, what doesn't make sense? How could it be phrased better? I think it's an incredibly powerful tool. I don't think it's necessarily the end all. So I think it's like a good power drill or a really, really good pan when you're cooking, or olive oil if you'd like. It's part of a larger way to help run what you are doing through some quick checks to see whether or not you are on point. Because again, I think if you feed garbage into it or allow it to do whatever it's doing, you're going to get garbage out. But I think if you use it as a augmentation, it turns into something that is like having an editor or having a research assistant or having something like that by your side that you can ask a lot of questions to. And I think that's an incredibly powerful tool, because growing up, my mom used to say, go look it up. And we had an encyclopedia set and I would flip through or go to the library, figure it out. I think it's really powerful in that way. But one of the things that has done, and I think this is where AI will trip all of us up, is we have to check it. And we have to check it because it can spew out incredibly logical things that are not backed up. It is just that, a tool. You can use the best pan out there, but if you overheat it or whatnot, you're still going to burn the meal. So you have to be an active participant with it. I use it as a sounding board.
I almost think people are somewhat more engaged now, because before Google, that's the source of truth. Yeah, I don't need to check it. It's Google. But ChatGPT, everybody knows it hallucinates. It gives you false information. So now you got to go and double check it. But yeah. What about
No, please.
I was just gonna say, so obviously you've kind of mentioned that you use it for writing and research, and it's great at those things. But what about helping your business kind of run more efficiently, or kind of anything behind the scenes, maybe even client delivery?
I still have not started to do it that way, because when I work with my clients, I feel as though my clients are buying me and my brain. So I really do try to give them a bespoke product when I work with them. I haven't been using AI as much. I use it to see whether or not what I am providing has adjacencies that I have not thought of. I was working on, a friend of mine asked me a question about some legislation and how to draft it. I drafted up something and then I tossed it into Claude, I'll admit, and I said, hey, write this up. What have I forgotten? I said, write the legislation up, or check my legislation, see whether or not I've forgotten something in how to draft it. And he came up with something that was outside of the part of the US code that I'm very used to dealing with. Instead of working within Title 10, the code that covers the Department of Defense, it moved into the Transportation Code, which I think is 32. And I had to go in and read the code to understand what it was modifying, but I would have never considered writing it that way. So again, it was a nice thing to have a conversation with of what was missing or how else could this be structured. But again, I tend to still use it as a research assistant, not necessarily as a product generator. With regards to the book, one of the things that I am toying with, working my way through, is a second volume called Workbook, such that people can learn how to advocate and go through the processes themselves. Because I think until you do it, it's really, really hard to understand the nuances, the complexities, etc., and the time it will take, and the people who you're dealing with. So again, it's really nice to have that. I want to advocate for something, emissions legislation or cannabis legislation. I kind of want to break that down and show people how you can, as an individual or as a company, go advocate for yourself. There might be an AI component to that at some point, a tool. A lot of this is a lot of research and a lot of asking questions associated with how does this fit into a larger system. And I think that AI might be an avenue there to exploit and explore.
Yeah, for sure. I love the idea of the workbook. I saw something the other day. It was like, nobody learned how to swim by reading about water. Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
I saw this thing the other day that kind of reminded me of this. It was, nobody learned how to swim by reading about water.
Right. And again, you don't have to jump in yourself, although I advocate for everybody to do at least 6 months to a year as a fellow in their federal government, especially in their legislating branch, because once you see the complexity of it, it's very, very hard to forget it and assume that things move quickly. I would assume that 6 months as a line cook would give you absolute respect for the restaurant industry, or, again, pick anything. These are people. There's little p political things that go on in these environments. And to just think that things go quickly because you want them to go quickly is just not true. So again, I'm a big frog kisser, and I think you kiss as many frogs as you can, and maybe you'll find something that you love.
That's awesome. I think that's a pretty good place to kind of wrap things up here. I know it's kind of running late on time, but if you want to give shout outs, your LinkedIn, your website.
My LinkedIn is Adrienne Ramsay, ADRIENNE RAMSAY. I also have a Substack, and it's under my name, Adrienne Ramsay, but it's called Let's Talk Congress, where I'm talking about the processes and the procedures so that people have the basics associated with what's going on. They can sound smart at cocktail parties, but also understand why things are happening the way they're happening. Delphi-strategies.com is my website for Delphi Strategies. If you would like somebody to help pressure test your messaging and for your technology, if you're going to work with the government, or if you're just going to go up inside your company and try to get your leadership to agree with it. Politics is not just in DC or Ottawa or anywhere. Politics is everywhere, and you got to understand the political nature in order to sell what you want to sell.
Okay, that's great. Until next time, this is the Pipeline and People podcast.
Thank you, Jaden.
Thank you.